Marcel Proust from Le Prisonnier. A pair of wings, a different respiratory system, which enabled us to travel through space, would in no way help us. For if we visited Mars or Venus while keeping the same senses, they would clothe everything we could see in the same aspect as the things of the earth. The only true voyage, the only bath in the fountain of youth, would be not to visit strange lands, but to possess other eyes, to see the universe through the eyes of another, of 100 others, to see the 100 universes that each of them sees, that each of them is. And this we do with great artists. With artists like these, we do really fly from star to star.
Photography is just one mode of expression, and there are a number from painting to poetry. And the important thing with any sort of artistic form is the creativity itself, the uniqueness that you bring to the table. And one thing that I've realized over the years is that the way that you see the world, is different than anybody else. And the interesting thing about this is that you won't realize that, in the same way that a goldfish won't realize the water is around him.
The preservation of energy is selected for by evolution. And our mind uses a large amount of energy. And therefore, there will be cognitive shortcuts that will diminish the amount of resources that our mind uses. In the same way that a man in a spaceship may have muscles atrophy in that zero gravity environment if they don't exercise, if they don't exert pressure and a necessity to keep the muscular strength. So our minds will naturally tend to diminish the amount of energy that they expend. Now, in the sake of seeing, what we find is that we'll look in terms of generalizations. We'll highlight what's important to us and we'll ignore what's not. We will use symbols, we will use simplifications of certain ideas. If we want to have a taxi, for example, there are certain ideas of what a taxi may look like in the country that we're in. If we're looking for a bin, again, we'll find the same sort of bin or trash can as an object, as opposed to a specific thing with textures and colours and so on. We'll simplify the world around us with the mind. We'll generalise everything that we see. The people around us still, you may notice, for example, a new haircut, but your interpretation, your understanding of the people around you is coloured greatly by your own prior experience of that person, by your own prior experience of people in general. We will see partly what we want to see, both physically and also how they come across in terms of the sense, their character. If you visit family or friends after a long time, they will see you as the same person, even if you have changed. Habits are very useful because willpower is a finite resource. But habits also deaden our senses, also reduce the amount of information that we take in each day. Do you get the sense that life speeds up or that time flashes past? It's understood now that this is largely because of the lack of new memories being formed. If you're driving a familiar route to work, for example, you will find that the experience is largely unconscious. You know where you're going, and it's only the peculiar, the out of the ordinary, that will make it to your conscious attention. And so, in our day-to-day lives, habit allows our minds to conserve energy that we can use elsewhere. And what this does is that it means that we're making less memories. Everything seems very familiar. And this means that time, with the lack of new experiences, doesn't have those moments of heightened emotion, those moments of new learnings, those moments of peculiarity, something out of the ordinary that sticks out, that creates that experience in a way, for example, that a new thing or a new experience may give you. So 1 week learning away from your natural environment, away from your habitual life, will seem a lot longer than a couple of weeks in your habitual day-to-day environment. To live longer, we just need new experiences and more of them. And precisely because our minds have this ability to reduce our cognitive load by habitualizing our experience, by making unconscious a large amount of our experience of the world. We can become blind to the world around us. We can see and also not see, looking without really seeing what's there in front of us. And therefore, if you create as an artist, if you show through personal expression something that you have noticed, something that you find important, something that you find noteworthy, you can therefore defamiliarize it. You can jog other people out of the cognitive slumber and make them look at it afresh. You can suggest different ways of looking at ordinary things. I remember, for example, teaching a chap who was 80, and he would photograph the stonework, the small pieces of stone at the corners of walls in a medieval city. I'd seen them, and yet I hadn't seen them. He was actually a Welsh farmer who was very interested in the stonework, the masonry around the old city. And what he saw that I and others didn't was that they were used for old carts to reduce the impact of the cornering and therefore knocking chunks out of the wall. The photographs that he took were simple, clear, you could do them with an iPhone, but they showed a distinct perspective. They drew attention to something that was there, looked at, but also overlooked. And therefore that personal expression, that authentic seeing, seems to be too simple, too straightforward. And yet that's the real difference that I want to share. The point is that what you can see, that what you think is ordinary, somebody else may not notice, may have forgotten, or may not have seen at all. And therefore, by showing people what you're seeing, showing people the way that you see the world, through your framing, through your composition, through how you highlight certain objects, certain ideas with your photography, with your art, that's what's going to really defamiliarize. That's what's going to show people the way that you see the world. And Victor Shklovsky: habitualization devours works, clothes, furniture, one's wife, and the fear of war. And art exists that one may recover the sensation of life. It exists to make one feel things, to make the stony stony. The purpose of art is to impart the sensation of things as they are perceived and not as they are known. And if it takes on the Jungian archetypes, the symbols of the lost man or the rebellious child, the symbols that have been passed down not just through culture, but also by the instinctual beliefs that we share in culture, and even deeper in our consciousness itself, in its own creation, the seeds, the genesis of our symbols are found. By creating something clear, something clean, something authentic, something that you have seen that's arisen out of your own personal consciousness, you create something out of the human condition that, shared with others, becomes art.
The way that you see the world is different. It may seem to be similar, and indeed it is. But it's not the same. It's unique. And the important part about that is that while we are all the same, we are all different. And while we create art, by doing it from that sense of uniqueness, that authentic personal expression, that's when you create something that really can move others, because they identify with it, being as they are too involved with the human condition. Whether any art form, poetry, painting, photography, has some sort of semblance of the real world is irrelevant. The important part is that it moves people. The important part is that it moves you, that it is personal. So when you're creating things, obviously you'll be inspired by others. You'll be inspired by the beautiful world that we find around us. But overall, the important thing is to be inspired by your own thoughts, your own ideas, your own reactions to other things. When you create that, art becomes no longer a mere mimesis of the world. It becomes some personal expression that, shared by others, moves them far more than a simple replication of the world could ever do. When you create history. You create those moments that if you had not done it, it never would have been done. So go within yourself, realize that the way that you see the world is very different in some ways than others. Have that personal expression and bring it forth. Share it and find that others find the same sort of beliefs that you have, the same ideas. They relate to them, they learn from them, and they understand your own perspective, and in doing so, understand the world and their own perspective of it as well. Creativity is personal expression. Personal expression shared with others is art.